Usually how I like to start these conversations is really about an individual's journey. And you and Ethnotek is really one of the originals, man, that I covered on Cause Artists. You guys have been
Yeah.
over a
Thank you,
decade
man.
now,
Yeah,
over a
you've been
decade now.
backing us since the beginning.
Over,
Thank you, dude.
it's an incredible to finally get to chat, man. I'm so glad we get to chat now that you've had 10 years of this. We talk about a lot of different things, but for those who don't know, kind of dive into the journey of Ethnotek, how it started and what's it about.
Yeah, sure. So, Ethnotek collaborates with artisans in Ghana, Guatemala, India, Indonesia, and Vietnam by combining their traditional handmade textiles with our high-tech laptop and travel bags. And I initially got the idea from I was living in Vietnam. My wife and I were living there 2005, 6. I was designing bags for another brand called Crumpler. And I was there full time, and there's a lot of national holidays. And on one of them, I took a solo motorbike trip through the Northern Highlands where I connected with some Hmong communities there that create these amazing handmade textiles. And being a bag designer at the time, I was super inspired and wanted to find a way to combine them with bags in kind of a customizable way. And I hadn't really seen these types of traditional textiles on high tech, like waterproof bags. I've seen them on kind of like the
Right.
tourist market fall apart in a week or month kind of thing.
Right.
And so just kind of jotted the idea down in my journal at that point, and then just tabled it for 3 or 4 years until I was back stateside and working another job for another bag company. And then finally decided to kind of go for it on my own. I felt I had learned enough and been close to the founders of both of those business who taught me kind of the ins and outs of running a soft goods business, and wanted to give back and do something unique, and went for it and launched the business in like 2011.
Amazing, man. So when you made that decision, did you go back to some of the communities that you met and spoke with them? Were they doing their handmade textiles for companies as well, or they were just doing it for themselves and just selling it at flea markets and stuff like that? Like, did you have to go to them and be like, "Hey, would it be okay if we like created these bags with you?" Right? Like, was it foreign to them, or they were sort of ready to go from day one?
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty ready to go from day one. So like it's been in their culture for centuries, and it's something they do on their free time. So agriculture is their primary source of income.
Gotcha.
And so, in between harvests or in their free time, they're creating these textiles. And one Hmong woman weaves or embroiders 2 skirts per year. And we actually make, at least the Hmong textile products are made from upcycled tribal skirts.
Hmm.
And so they actually usually, these days sell them at tourist markets. So
Right.
across the highlands, there's quite a few tourists that like cruise through there. And so there's a market when tourists are around, and
Mm-hmm.
that's usually like a one-time purchase and done kind of thing. I do know that some of them work with other companies, but I don't know really in what capacity. So it's not like we revived an entire industry by any means. But yeah, I did return after the first year to Vietnam, mainly because I had a connection there. A friend of mine started his own sewing factory at the same time I was launching Ethnotek, and he and I got along a lot, and wanted to support each other in some capacity down the road, and that was our opportunity. So got some interest from REI in the US. I don't know if you know that
Mm-hmm.
outdoor
Sure.
store.
Oh yeah.
And that was kind of the big wake up call for, okay, it's getting serious now. I need to get back to the roots, back to the factory, so that it can be like super hands on. And my wife had already moved back there as well, and she was teaching kindergarten at the time, and so I stayed with her, and yeah, came full circle.
You said you were in the industry before that. What were some of
Yeah.
sort of the takeaways that you learned from that made you confident that you can go out on your own, right, and start something like this?
So I think some of the takeaways were at the first brand I was designing bags for, they had a really cool model where they had distributor meetings every
Mhm.
year where they would bring all of their key customers to Vietnam, and it would be up to us designers to pitch our own designs to sell the distributors on the upcoming collections. And so they involved their designers kind of from the ground up, from a sales perspective, costing perspective. And it's not just design something for you have to learn about the customers and their markets and design it for them at the end of the day. And so that was a really good exposure. And then they even took it all the way to at least I had the experience and a couple other designers to work in a shop where the bags are sold
Hmm.
in Germany, in Cologne, Germany. So that really took it. I got to see everything hands on, because I was used to being in the sample room and close to the factory production side, but then they brought us all the way to the front end, the retail side, the distribution side. So learned a ton in a very short amount of time in that regard. And so having some exposure to sales and marketing, not just being, behind the scenes
Hmm.
designing product that way. And then in the other company, I got to learn more about like the pricing structure, margin requirements, and packaging design. And so between the two brands, I kind of was exposed to all aspects of how to run a soft goods
That's great.
business. And so yeah, and the one company was very retail distribution focused, while the other was also had a little bit of that, but was primarily e-commerce. And e-commerce is something I didn't really know a lot about, SEO, anything like that. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
that was quite a rounded experience. And I'd actually never intended to start my own business. I was inspired by that, the second brand I worked for in LA. And I was like, you know what, like I'm super inspired by, I had that idea in the back of my head the whole time around handmade textiles and helping revive some of these traditions through modern bag design. And so I just kept getting more, and it just kept coming into my mind more and more to at least scratch that itch. And so, it affected the way I asked questions. And so I asked, everything that came to mind on, how does it work from the factory? What is like shipping and logistics?
Right.
What is margin markups and all these things? And so it was like, I didn't study bag design in university. I don't even know if they offer that as a
I was
course in
about to
any design
say, as you're
school.
saying this, it's like you got your master's degree, right?
Yeah,
From just like
exactly.
doing it and being on the ground and learning and asking the questions. I think it's such a great point, because sometimes we want to just start things, and sometimes you just need to start things, right? That's how you learn. But there's
Totally.
always different avenues to build something, right? And create something. And one is to just be in it on the ground with other companies doing it. You could take bits and pieces of what they do. When you're ready to start, you kind of have the education of, like you said, how margin works, like price points, manufacturing, all these different things. And then there's little bitty sprinkles you can, flavors you can put on it yourself, right? To make the system better or make it unique. So I think
Exactly.
it's a great story to mention that there's not one path. You don't just have to jump in. If you can find a way to kind of do a master's degree on the job, so to speak, right? Like go take 4 years and just get in the industry, right? And learn the basics of whatever industry you're in, right? It's such a valuable thing.
Exactly. And that's in my opinion, that's where real innovation comes from.
Hmm.
Is, I mean, you can be too early for something if you do something radically different, and then the market just isn't there. Like consumers like, I don't know what that
Right.
is, and I don't know if I want to pay money for it. But if it's an evolution, if it's a really smart and useful evolution of something that already exists, that's an evolution of that, or feels similar to something that they already use or interact with, that's when real innovation can take place. And so I think most companies reverse engineer a lot of, either when they start out or still in their product development. And you look at your competitors, you pick it apart and you say, okay, how can we do better, or how can we make it our own way? And so like I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and they get overwhelmed about that. They have so many ideas, and they're like, I don't even know where to start, and like how
Right.
can I be different? And there's so many people are like bigger than me and better than me.
Hmm.
And it's like, yeah, okay, so pick a handful of companies that you think are really, really doing a great job of it. Pick a ultra premium one, pick, a
Hmm.
mid-market one and a mass market one, and then list what they do well, their strengths, and also list their weaknesses, and then pinpoint somewhere in that matrix where you fit into it, how you can be different, because you don't want to be in a red ocean where you're competing one to
Hmm.
one on features. You want to be radically different, or at least different enough to where someone asks you, okay, so why should I care about your brand or your product or your service? And then you just say something very simple, and it's because no one else is doing that, and you have a much easier time. So the work is up front in doing that reverse engineering, but also having your main priority is the question to yourself: how am I different? How can I be different?
Speaking of sort of innovation, I wanted to get your thoughts on this, because there has been a really cool and interesting revolution, or just it's becoming more and more mainstream, is making textiles out of plastic waste, right, from the ocean or from, dump sites, just trying to corral the plastic. And you being in Indonesia and around East Asia, and they seem to have a issue with sort of, garbage ending up in the ocean and just different waste problems. Have you been sort of looking at the ability to do that? I know there are brands out there, they're doing that. Is that something you think Ethnotek might do in the future? Have you looked into it? Like, what are some of the pros and cons of doing that? Is it super difficult to get into for, a smaller brand? You kind of got to let the big brands do it first so they can innovate and find the structure to make it reasonable for more smaller brands to do it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's kind of two sides to it. So like Ethnotek, we have the tech fabrics, or those are the machine made, high tech, waterproof, super lifetime warranty, durable
Yep.
fabrics. And then there's also the traditional handmade textiles. And so some of the weavers that we work with, primarily in India, they have been they weave some rugs made out of upcycled single use plastic that
Mm,
is basically cut by hand with a pair of scissors to create individual strips.
mm.
And then they do the same process as they do with cotton. They make warp yarn and weft yarn out of it, and then they weave it the same way, and it has its own vibe. And we haven't gotten too much into that on the artisan side of things. They're open to it. They're open to trying new things. They love the idea of their traditional craft and culture evolving in modern applications. And so they're super excited, especially the younger generation, about seeing their family's textiles on a pair of shoes or a backpack in our
Yeah,
case.
that's cool.
But we do work with upcycled materials on the tech waterproof bag body side of things. So like most of our collection of bags right now are made out of 100% recycled PET plastic bottles,
Gotcha.
which seems to be pretty mandatory these days. A
Yeah.
lot a lot of brands are doing it, and it's the right thing to do. I think you kind of have to, especially if the market is demanding it. And I think that's a really good trend if the market is demanding it. But at the same time, there's a bit of storytelling going on there, because I do know from being in the industry that though it's made out of recycled plastic bottles, it
Hmm.
does have a much larger carbon footprint than, let's
Yep.
say, virgin nylon polyamide textiles. So those are really efficient and they last longer, and so they break down and end up in landfills less likely, or than the recycled yarns, and usually consume a lot less electricity and water and whatnot. And so it's kind of the case of two rights. Both have their virtues. It just depends on what kind of story you want to tell, or what kind of story people want to read into or subscribe to.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's interesting to me. There's pros and cons to everything, right? Even when you're trying to do something positive, it still could have these negative, not really side effects, but just negative installments of what goes into it, right? Which you don't sort
Yep.
of think of. You're
Yep.
so kind of focused on, let's get this plastic out the ocean, let's, make this, or let's do something to solve this problem, right? But
Mhm.
it also might create, an unforeseen issue that could have its adverse effects too. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a difficult thing to process sometimes. And I think going back to what you said, it's just kind of look at the market, take what you think people are doing really well and figure out a way where you can fit in with some, originality, right? Maybe find a way to have that process be carbon neutral, right? Or eventually carbon
Mhm.
negative or something like that. Then that will
Yep.
sort of shift the idea that process can be sustainable in some way. I wanted to kind
Yeah.
of chat about the different areas because you had mentioned Vietnam, but you're also working in Ghana, Guatemala, India, Indonesia. How do you come to know these sort of new artisans and villages? Do they reach out? Does somebody reach out? Do you kind of just
Mhm.
go and build relationships? How does that part work when you build out like sort of this global network of artisans?
That all came with a lot of upfront research that I did
Hmm.
beforehand, because I wanted to have a diverse collection of textiles, regions, and styles to offer. Because at the end of the day, like, it can't be a long-term sustainable thing if it doesn't sell. Like, there's a symbiotic
Hmm.
relationship between the artisan's work and the end customers who end up buying it, because that's all we do. Like, we're the bridge. Like, if anything, we're of service to the artisan to take what they do and connect it with an end
Hmm.
consumer. So making a kind of a judgment call based on my design experience on what I think will sell, what people will like, and also what is the maximum impact we can have. So I did some research on countries and their textiles, and some of the regions that had, still a lot of local demand, but still a lot of room for, reviving something and scaling it. So to have an impact. And so just started learning about textiles. I went to the public library and started reading, and bought quite a few Lonely Planet travel guides to see where you could travel to in some of these countries to visit artisans, and kind of deducted it down to a couple areas in Central America, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and eventually it came down to like quite a diverse collection of aesthetic, and also came down to three main techniques. One is like handmade batik, which is wax resist dyeing, and then traditional loom weaving and embroidery. And so I felt like that was a good 3-tiered approach. And the countries that I had selected, the ones you just listed, I think were going to be exciting to work with and highlight, and I felt we could do good work there. So just started, dialing phones and sending emails to try to make connections, and then eventually, got to the point where it looked like it would be promising, but still difficult to kind of communicate online. And then just visited each of them to establish an in-person relationship. And then after doing that and kind of clarifying what our intentions were, and
Hmm.
that we don't want this to be a one-time and done thing, and more like a long-term relationship where we buy every 3 months for the next 10-20 years. And once they understand kind of the long-term vision and where they could fit into that, and the my intentions for the business and our collaboration, that was everything. So going there in person
Hmm. Yeah.
really makes all the difference. Yeah.
That's huge. What was that experience like when you do that? What is kind of take us there, if you will, right? When because we're
Yeah.
so we've been so so travel restricted for so long. We kind of forget what
Yeah.
it's like to
Yeah.
connect with people in different cultures and different languages. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna selfishly ask, like, what were those memories like? Like, going to Ghana, going to these places, and kind of building relationships with those communities, and what is it like conversating with them? What do they want out of the relationship as well, right? Like,
Yep. Yep.
you kind of know what you and the company wants, but what are they at? What are some of their ask and needs?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So it's different in kind of with each country, but like particularly India and Indonesia, I really did like set up all on my own from scratch. And so going there in person. So India, for example, was the first artisan region that we had partnered up with. So I had the luck of getting invited to teach a bag design masterclass at a university in Pune, India, in Maharashtra. It was a former colleague of mine at Crumpler, actually, where I designed bags for the first time in Vietnam. He was teaching at that university. And so he started a bag design masterclass, which is just a couple week program. And I was invited to teach that with 2 or 3 other people. And so I had my plane ticket paid for, and it happened to be at the same time that I was ideating on Ethnotek and what it could be. And I actually had a sample in hand
Nice.
for it. So I, used all of my vacation days left at the job that I had so that I could teach, but then also have some extra time afterwards to go on my own and then visit the artisans. And so then I took a plane and then a train and then a bumpy bus ride to Gujarat state, to the city of Bhuj. And then I had researched there's a lot of artisan communities, lots of different textiles, and a lot of villages supporting that craft in the area. And so just went to the guest house, asked the host at the guest house if he knew anyone, and they did. And then, of course, I had some contacts based on my research of people spearheading projects there. They didn't know I was coming, so I just kind of knocked on the door and said, "Hey, I'm Jake, and these are the people I'm hoping to meet, and can you help me out?" And everyone was super positive and more than happy to oblige and help me out. And so they made some introductions Usually it's the case where I tell them what I'm after, and then they'd bring me to like a souvenir shop and like, yes, you can buy the fabric from here. I'm like, no, no, no. I want to, I hope to purchase textiles in large quantities every quarter for many years to come. And if you want, and if we have your permission, tell your cultural story, because the brand is also all about, cultural awareness and celebrating diversity, and not just making cool, colorful products and hiding behind the kind of do-good aspect of helping the artisans. It's really about how can we facilitate taking traditional craft and culture into a modern context. And so once they understood that this could be a long-term sustainable thing, and that, okay, we trust this guy, he has good intentions, let's see how it goes. It changes from, taking me to a tourist shop to meeting their cousins, uncles,
Right,
families,
right,
that sort of thing. And then it's all about establishing a relationship, having food together, having laughs together, and then not talking business really until, the
right.
last few days of the trip. And so, yeah, I did that in India, and it was a very similar process in Indonesia as well. Ghana, we had connected with our supplier there via Alibaba of all places. And so then we'd been talking over the years and sending things electronically, and then eventually went there to meet him years after we actually had been doing work together. And Guatemala, same thing, found someone online and just got started, and then eventually got more and more involved in our own way over time. And in Vietnam, the production manager, a friend of mine that I just mentioned, Mr. I is his name. He facilitates all of the textile sourcing there. So, we lived there for many years, and we would go visit them together, and he would be the facilitator and translator, which pretty much always is needed. I think Ghana is probably the only place where, yeah, we have a facilitator there too, and he speaks great English, and we didn't have too much trouble there thanks to him. And so, yeah, you have to adapt, but it always helps having someone that is based there, that has connections, that is business savvy, but also understands the traditional artisan textile process and the culture behind it, so that they can make sure we're treading lightly. And so someone that speaks both languages, right, like the artisan side and also the business side, because
Right.
we need to be able to communicate with someone after we leave. Like, it's not practical to go there every month, every year. So communicating with someone that checks their email every day, that has experience in shipping things via air freight and sea freight, and there's a whole bunch of logistics. And so it's rare to find these individuals, but they're around, and it's usually the kind of the younger generations, the entrepreneurs, the hungry ones that are keen, that have the same values. So we would find people in each place, I don't know, serendipitously, or if it's just the way that it is, but a lot of people looking to do the exact same thing, like they want to continue their families and their culture's craft, and are looking for new ways to do it and new business opportunities to do it, because you can do good while doing well, and we all understand that. And so finding people that share the same values, I think, is crucial. And so we did that. Takes a while, a lot of misunderstandings along the way, but that's part of the adventure and the excitement of parachuting into some place without with the plan, but also not knowing what the hell is going to even happen.
You mentioned sort of culture, right, and community over the last decade. What have you learned about different cultures and the communities? What are some of the things you take away from those cultures, right, that you appreciate, or you want to implement them sort of in your own life, or like what have you sort of learned from the artisans themselves and the cultures and communities that they come from?
That's a really good question. There's so many ways to answer that too. Probably one of many that stand out is to slow down. I guess due to the nature of the textile process itself. It's something that takes time. It's something that takes love and takes extreme attention to detail. And a lot of these craftspeople that do this, it kind of seems to, like, no pun intended, weave into their whole daily life in terms of the rhythm of in which to live, but also what's important. And so being an anxious person, going from my kind of fast-paced, stressy American career-driven lifestyle to a weaving village where it's
Right.
like the opposite of that. It's a totally different vibe, and it, yeah, slowing down is something that I struggle with. But once you're able to uh, at least practice it most of the time. It makes a huge difference. And asking questions, so not going in and just saying we want to do this, we have all these ideas, but starting with, you know, what do you think, and what's important to you, and how do you do this, and what does that mean, and what is this color, and who are these people, and how long does that take? And so slowing down and asking questions, I think, are more on the practical kind of lifestyle as it relates to the work side of things. But then on the cultural, like, tradition side of things, it's just awe-inspiring being connected to kind of the religion associated and the spiritual beliefs associated with the textiles, and how they weave a lot of these things that they see in daily life into the textiles as well. You know, I feel privileged and honored to be around it, and, you know, learning about Hinduism and animism and food, and about, you know, their individual philosophies, and seeing how they are with their families. It's just all so beautiful to be around, and it just makes me feel grateful. And, you know, when I do get stressed out in my job, or, you know, and am stateside, or even here for that matter, it's a check for me, because I was there, and I know what it can be like, and they're teaching me. And also it helps remember, like, why we're doing this in the first place, and who we have on our side. And it's you know, they're our business partners. You know, it's a trade
Yeah.
relationship. It's not like us helping the poor defenseless artisans. They're entrepreneurs too. And, like, my job is just to help bridge the gap, you know, get their incredible artwork onto our products and connect the end customers, so that we can keep investing in their craft and the culture that's literally woven into it. So, long-winded answer. I don't know if it answered it, but uh yeah.
No, that's great, man. That's great. I want to touch on two more things here, but before we wrap it up. One would
Yep.
be, we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, but I kind of want to maybe get another long-winded answer from you, and that's sort of
Sure.
being 10 years, you know, in a company and starting from scratch. And, you know, I'm always inspired of looking at lessons learned and advice I could take from, you know, from other individuals, and I hope other people like that as well. So I kind of just want to get, you know, your advice for maybe future social entrepreneurs or impact entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in general who want to get started, or maybe they're at a company like you were, right? But they have plans on starting something, right? And they kind of need, you know, a little bit of a roadmap to do so.
Mhm.
You know, and it's much different now. Obviously, 10 years ago, there's different ways you can get started now, right? There might be
Yep.
quicker ways, it might be better or worse ways. You know, we're not sure. But if you were, you know, 10 years ago, if you were about to sort of start Ethnotek, right, in 2021, what do you think some of the steps would be for you to take now, maybe versus back then?
Yeah, really good question. And that's kind of why I wanted to reach out to you and have a conversation, because it's something I want to speak more to in general, because, you know, I can only be so effective behind my laptop all day every day, and I definitely want to encourage other social entrepreneurs, young, old, new, whatever, to do what we do, because, you know, from the bottom up, you know, we can change the industry together. There's a lot of corporations running rampant, and there's a lot going on in the online culture right now that I believe is quite toxic and attacking small to medium-sized social entrepreneurs and businesses that do good, because, you know, the second you say you're doing something good, you open yourself up for scrutiny, while some of
Sure.
these other companies that aren't mission driven aren't receiving any
Yeah,
criticism.
it's
And so
crazy.
I
Yeah.
think in today's climate, like, I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs that are scared to start a business because of the criticism and getting canceled, and their reputation getting berated, and all of these things. And so, you know, I can't speak to how to heal the culture online because of how toxic it is, but I can speak to how to start the right way. And so I think you can head all these things off at the pass by making a good plan. And so we just published our internal ethical sourcing guidebook, which we call the
Mm,
sourcing roadmap.
wow.
And so, you know, we've been over 10 years in what we do. And so our experiences in textiles, and it can translate to many different industries and supply chains as well. Yeah, so I would say start with a plan for not just making the thing, because oftentimes making the thing is the easy part. So it's how to make the thing, who is going to be involved, and how you tell the story once you bring it to market. So what happens on the back end and on the front end is pretty critical, I think, for at least social enterprises who are advertising the good that they do, because you got to be as transparent as possible. And you also got to be careful not to be, making claims that aren't true to your values and what you actually do. So you don't want
Right.
to be virtue signaling. You don't want to be doing any of that nasty stuff. And it all starts with a plan. Like really looking at every aspect of the supply chain and seeing where your values fit within that, and making sure that you really are doing the best possible good all the way up until the finished product. And that's simple, like communication is easy these days. So just ask all of your partners, is this cool? What would you prefer? What are the limitations? There's a lot of things that you can put in place to essentially make your mission bulletproof, but you got to do that from the beginning. And so that's why we published our sourcing roadmap, is that hopefully so other people who want to work with artisans, especially as it relates to textiles, can do it right. And I don't say that we're experts in this area, but we've been doing it for a while, and it's been working, and all of our partners are pretty happy, and we all love what we do, and we have nothing to hide, and I wouldn't do it any other way. And so at this point, it's like getting the story out more and using the right tone in which to speak about what it is that you do. And so I would say, yeah, start with the plan, and ask questions. Go slow, ask questions to all of your partners that you run the business with, and reach out to your favorite brands. You never know who's going to respond to your email or answer your phone call and give some advice. And so just keep pushing. Like I get emails all the time from people starting up, and I don't have time to get to all of them, especially on time, but I try my best to help where I can. And so, yeah, reach out. Don't do it in a vacuum, because usually that can lead to some problems. So collaborate, be open, don't be afraid to make mistakes, and definitely be careful about how you set it up and also how you release it into the world, and don't be scared. And so I think if there's, as long as there's a good plan behind it and you involve some people with experience in it, then you are set free to do what you're passionate about. And that's ultimately what needs to happen. That's the end result of having a good plan, not just the product that you release onto the world, but how you are, what's your state of being when you release it to the world. Because at the end of the day, if your passion and enthusiasm is alive and not strained or squashed or suppressed in any way, that's going to translate, and that's going to lead to really good things for not only you, but for your business and all the partners that help you elevate the business the way that it is. So I guess that's what I would say about that.
That's amazing, man. The other thing I wanted to because I remember really liking this about you guys early on, and it's one thing I think is it can be important, is that start with one product too, right? I mean, you don't have to have
Yeah,
a
exactly.
massive product line, right? Like, look at the market. Like, can you do one single product really, really, really well, right? And then start
Yep.
there. And
Yep.
then if you do that well,
Exactly.
eventually you can have more in your product line, just like you did, right? You started with one bag, right? And now you
Yep.
have a
Yep.
plethora of product lines. So
Yep.
I just thought
Yep.
that was a great way to move. And I think sometimes people, when they start, they think they have to do everything up front and have, 6 products out the gate, and have this elusive thing and like this big mega thing. It's like, just start so small, do one
Yep.
thing
Yep.
incredibly well, and that's how you'll get customers to support you, because you make amazing high quality this one thing, right? And then you can
Yep.
start slowly moving into another product.
Exactly. Yep. That's 100% right. And I love that you know that about us. That's like true testament that you've been supporting us from the beginning. And big thanks to what you do, man. Like you've dedicated most of your time to serving social entrepreneurs and, impact investment and all the good things that are, people are, working their butts off to do, something positive in the world. And kudos to what you do, man. I think that's really amazing.
I'll end on one last question would
Yeah.
be the future, right? And it's kind of, difficult for everybody to kind of look at what 3 to 5 years down the road looks like. But just from Ethnotek point of view, like what are some of the successes and goals maybe, when you sit down and, write out sort of long-term goals or just annual goals? Like what are some of the successes you want to see within the next few years? Is it going to more countries, getting more artisans, or is it just keeping the relationships with the current artists and just sort of growing that relationship and that culture and community together and just building out the Ethnotek customer base through the storytelling that you've been doing for a decade now?
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you asked that because we actually do have a good foundation now because we just every year we like to publish some sort of report on the impact that we do. Usually it's to our newsletter subscribers because those are customers. We want them to feel good about what their purchase does. And now we're publicizing it a bit more. And so we just recently published our impact report. So that's a really cool place to start because in doing the math of it all, it was pretty fun because and the statistic that I like the most is the total life to date meters of fabric that we've made in collaboration with all of our artisan countries. And that's 60,000 meters. I think it's something around 60,219 or so, which equates to 6 Mount Everest stacked vertically. When I look at stuff like that, I'm like, all right, dude, like your problems, it's okay. Like it's this is not an art project. We're all doing this together and I can't take credit for that, right? Like it's our customers that make that happen. And so that taking that metric right there. So this is like 200 artisans across 5 countries that are creating textiles in collaboration with Ethnotek on an annual basis. And however long it takes, I want to 10x that. So I want to take those 200 artisans and multiply that to 2,000 artisans because the ones we work with currently, they have the ability to scale. Like they're hungry for more work and they have they know how to collaborate and there's no competition going on there. They just want to keep this thing going and they don't protect their specific motifs. They're happy to teach those to other weavers to keep the good thing going. So I think it's possible. So 10xing our goal to 2,000 artisans weaving full-time, batik embroidery full-time per year. And I would also like to add a new artisan sourcing region every other year. I would prefer every year, but I think logistically that's probably a bit difficult to do. But a new country or a new village or new technique and process every other year, which I think is achievable, and it keeps it exciting and it keeps gives something to look forward to for existing customers and future customers. So that's my ideal goal as it relates to the artisan side of things. From a product development standpoint, oh man, I don't know. So much is changing these days so fast. Like what is the future of travel, and what kinds of things are people going to be carrying? Because ultimately that's what we do. We design bags for people to carry their stuff. And so looking at micro travel, local travel, mindful travel, I think that cameras are getting smaller. There's a lot going on with technology that will influence the bags that we design. So I can't really even answer that from a product standpoint. So for me, it's always the core, the mission, and the impact that we create through the products we design. But yeah, I think as more and more people are shopping online, and I think during a COVID world, a lot of people are at home, and I think rethinking their purchasing cycle, their consumption habits, and I think that a lot of habits are going to change for the better once we're able to get on top of this thing, back out into society and traveling and going back to whatever life will look like as that happens. And I think that there's more and more people looking to ethical brands now than ever, and so I think that that's something that's really exciting. So I think that competition is no longer a thing. I think that the opportunity for collaboration with other brands to co-create,
Totally
co-brand,
agree. Totally agree. Love it.
come together and maximize the good, but also create, amazing things and incredible projects that bring people together. And so I see a huge opportunity in that. And so my goal is to just be a part of that and help as many people as we can along the way.
Amazing, my brother. Thank you so much for taking the time. And it's
Absolutely.
been awesome to watch the journey, man. And listen, it's a lot of businesses in general don't last this long, right? So it's
Yeah.
kudos to you and sort of the team, and just keep plugging away, and that's
Yeah.
the thing.
Thank you.
Longevity is so hard to do,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it's a great, testament to your customers as well, right? And to the consumers that have really, supported you guys along the way. And so hopefully that obviously continues to happen. It continues to grow. But cheers to the next decade, man, and best of luck going forward.
Yeah. Thank you very much, man. And thank you for all the support over the